This podcast is proudly sponsored by Joro Protein, a Rhode Island plant-based protein supplement company designed for athletes and adventurers. They deliver 25 grams of protein, 5 grams of BCAAs, and 18 essential vitamins and minerals. It's non-GMO, it's gluten-free, it's allergen-free, no artificial flavors, no added sugar or stevia, and it has no additional gums, thickeners, or fillers. Right now, you can get 30% off on this podcast with the code JORORODISTRENGTH 2022, and you can find them at joroprotein.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Phase CBD. That's P-H-A-Z-E. They are a local Rhode Island company who makes and manufactures a wide-ranging variety of CBD products that are formulated specifically for athletes. It doesn't matter if you're a CrossFitter, a strongman, bodybuilder, or powerlifter. These products are for you. These products range from tinctures to seltzers to even roll-on applicants. By supporting this business, you're supporting a local Rhode Island business and you're supporting this podcast directly. Please check them out at phasesports.com.
What's going on, Kelly?
How are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for jumping on.
Total pleasure. I'm at a conference, so hopefully this sounds okay.
You sounds great. Yeah, sounds really good.
Nice to see you.
You too. Yeah, I was messaging back and forth with Margaret. She's like, "Oh yeah, he's traveling, but he's ready to go." I'm like, "Let's do it." Awesome. So I thank you for accommodating that.
Absolutely. Total pleasure.
Yeah. Awesome.
What do you want to get into today?
So I had a couple topics. We're recording now, but I'll do an official intro. But I had a couple topics that I wanted to see, kind of where you were at, where you wanted to talk about. So obviously, I want to talk about the new book. One, because I'm interested in it, and two, because I think that's probably on the forefront of your mind right now. So you probably got a lot to say about it. I'm always interested in this whole PT landscape of. So I'm a little background on me. So I'm part of Danny Matei's mastermind group.
Haven't we met before?
Yes. Yep. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted. I'm sure you meet a ton of people, so I just wanted to remind you on that one, refresh your memory. So yeah, so I'm a PT, and I see on Instagram, and I think it's been getting a little better, but the whole landscape or outlook about how manual therapy has kind of been under fire against some of these like evidence-based practice charlatans or gurus, whatever you want to call them, which I get both sides of it, but I'm curious. That's always something
let's talk about that for sure, because I think we can actually take their perspective and try to understand it. I think that could be useful for people, you know?
Cool. Yeah, I like that. I want to talk about a little bit about kind of direction PT is going as far as like private pay, cash-based pay. I want to talk about, well, and wherever the conversation leads us, I'm totally fine too. The CrossFit Health Organization, kind of what's coming up with that. I just had a podcast with Dr. Amy West, so it was cool to talk to her and get some of her point of views on that. So
she's rad.
She's so awesome. She's really cool.
Well, so let's jump in. Let's go.
Let's do it. All right. So
Kumite.
What's going on, guys? Dr. Matt here, host of the Roadie Strength podcast. Very special guest on today. I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Kelly Starrett. What's going on, Kelly?
Nice to see you, my friend.
Nice to see you. So I really appreciate you jumping on. This is one I've definitely been looking forward to. You're part of the reason getting into PT school. I was someone I've looked up to, someone who I really like what you do, and I try to make my practice kind of fall in line.
Pause you. Yeah. Do I have to apologize now or say you're welcome? I don't know which one it is, but
maybe both. So actually, I had the book right here next to me, Becoming a Supple Leopard.
Oh man.
So I had to pull that out to show you.
Wait till we add the next 400 pages, then it'll start to make sense.
Yeah. So I usually start these podcasts off with some rapid fire questions. These are interesting for me, and I think they kind of can get the conversation going. So first one I like to ask, I'm a big coffee drinker. What's your favorite coffee shop?
Ooh, favorite coffee shop. The best latte I ever had in the world was in Santa Cruz, next to CrossFit Santa Cruz. I even forget the name of the place, but I went back and they changed their machine and it tasted different. I will tell you though, this is more importantly, we brew our own espresso at home. I currently am drinking Stumptown Holler Mountain, which is absolutely just such a stellar regular espresso. But whenever I travel, I try to OD on cappuccinos. Like that's my jam. And oftentimes I'll go away and I'll be like, Juliet, I'm gonna see if I can get 50 cappuccinos. She's like, you're gone for 4 days. I'm like, we're gonna see what happens. So, I think you can titrate up until you have diarrhea, and then you back off a little bit and you're right in there. So I love coffee.
That's all. I knew that going in, so I was excited for that answer. As one of I think it was your Joe Rogan podcast. I think you had a podcast immediately after that. You were saying how you had quite a few shots of espresso before the podcast with him.
Oh, that was bad. I had a bulletproof coffee and I was super jittery. And then Joe came in and got super stoned, and we did not talk at the same level for like an hour and a half.
Yeah. Hey, it was a great podcast. I love listening to it. Quick side route here. I really liked some of your early ones with the Barbell Shrug crew when you were on there with Matt Vincent and Mark Bell. Those are some great podcasts.
Great.
Yeah,
they're great. What's fun is I'll just I know we have a lot to get to, but I just always reminder to everyone that the internet can make you feel like you're alone as a sole provider, sole practitioner, or that everyone's a sole sort of operator. It's not true. You need a squad. You need to have bright, smart friends like who challenge you and put up with your crap. I mean, I have some really talented friends. It's true.
That's so cool. We'll keep on moving along. We'll go favorite go-to breakfast. This could be a breakfast spot or whatever, like maybe your favorite thing you make in the morning.
Currently, my favorite breakfast, man, I look, I'm going to give you two answers. One is food log, a breakfast burrito any day, anytime, any place, like always. But currently I take 2 bananas, sometimes 1 banana. I mash it up with a bunch of eggs, cinnamon and vanilla, and then I fry that. And it becomes the greatest pancake of all time. And then I put in hot blueberries. I'll smash the blueberries in there. And then my wife discovered this like sugar-free syrup, which is like crack. And I cover a little bit of crack and a little bit of butter. And that breakfast will go the distance. But my friend Rob Wolf a long time ago called toast. It's like he called it like the antichrist of breakfast. And I have to tell you, I make sourdough toast like with a cup of coffee. I'm good to go.
That's great. I wrote down that recipe, by the way. I'm gonna have to try that out.
It's so good.
Next question. We're getting a little more into the PT side or the strength and conditioning CrossFit. I think we'll see where this goes. Favorite current Instagram accounts that you like to stuff that maybe comes up
that's a really good one.
Or yeah.
There used to be this guy named the Liver King. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. This recent wound is it's open wound right now.
There's a bunch of everyone when this was recorded. Liver King was exposed as a fraud.
Yep.
Everyone is shocked. One of my favorite weightlifting accounts is Venus Weightlifting. Coach Gabby is this woman in China, and she does such a great job. And I watch a lot of Olympic lifting, try to understand what's going on. So that's my kind of current. And then always obsessed with Nature is Metal. We show that around. And then I just follow this new sourdough baking account that I'm obsessed with.
Nice. The sourdough is making a comeback. Let's go.
The COVID comeback. It's totally true.
Nature's Metal is also a common answer on there, which I'm surprised about, but at the same time not, because that's a great account.
Well, you probably watch Kook Slams, Jerry of the Day, some of those, right? Yep. Those are all in there. My daughters love. We kind of have like I have 2 teenage daughters. I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, senior and a freshman, and sending each other memes and Instagram videos is sort of a love language. I went heavy on raccoons for a little while, and then I kind of burned down on raccoons.
Raccoons are cool. Very cool animal. We'll go to the next question here. A similar question. Favorite podcast that you're listening to right now? Again, could be PT, CrossFit related, could be something else.
Yeah. Right now I'm still just there's so much going on in the world. I listen to The Economist and The Atlantic. I listen to both of those every morning. And then oftentimes I listen to The Daily. So if I can, walking around or getting ready in the morning, I usually listen to one of those podcasts just so I know what the hell's going on.
That's great. My fiance listens to The Daily, so during the morning when she gets ready, so I get clips of it here and there. So I only know half the truth.
Michael Barbaro. I spend a lot of mornings imitating Michael Barbaro. So
it's good. We got 2 more rapid fire questions. Next one, we have any books, favorite recent books, Audible books, something like that.
I am. That's that, man. I'm always going. I just started a book called Indigenous Continent, which has blown my mind. And it just came out, and it is written by a Finnish guy, and it's re-examining sort of historical experience and the storytelling and the history of Indigenous Americans, and just sort of what we have come to believe is not the truth at all about Indigenous peoples in the United States. And it's very, very amazing and very interesting. And it's like learning the history of where you live and how you grew up, and being feeling like you've been told a lie.
Very cool. Yeah.
I can't recommend that enough for people. That's mind blowing.
Nice. That's awesome. And then last question. I think you said it off air, well, off recording. Any travel plans coming up? You're traveling right now. You're at a conference right now?
I'm down in SoCal. There's a storm going on, but I work with this company called H-Wave, and we're just having their normal get together. So I'm just down here talking to people who are talking to physicians and physical therapists about pain and swelling.
Cool. All right. So I haven't actually heard of H-Wave before.
H-Wave is you may have heard of Mark Pro, which is the same company, but this is the FDA cleared version, and basically is an NMES device that we've had really amazing success with in helping patients manage swelling and congestion. And it's part of all our protocols because we can get so far ahead on swelling after injury and surgery. It's bananas.
I kind of want to go off on a tangent a little bit on that because I saw a Instagram post the other day with Squat University. He was on a podcast talking about ice, and I had one of the trainers I was with send me that. He's like, "Oh, did you know we probably shouldn't be icing injuries?" I'm like, I mean, first person I probably heard say that was Kelly Starrett. Can we talk about that a little bit? What kind of the protocol is for icing now?
Well, it turns out everyone who's been managing ice or managing injuries, managing surgeries, we've just evolved our thinking a little bit. What we realized was certainly giving people pain relief was very important, but that we probably could do a better job at evacuating the swelling, and that the inflammation was actually a really important part of the process. We've seen people really back away from ibuprofen, for example, or NSAIDs around surgery, but it just turns out that by getting the musculature to contract, we could actually do a better job of dumping the lymphatics. And then you ask, well, what are the ways to do that? Can I walk? Can I move? Can I do quad sets? How many calf pumps can you do? So prevent DVTs. And so with an NMES device, it turns out we can do that 20 out of 24 hours a day, which really, I just saw a study that came out with a surgeon who specializes in shoulders. And they basically have dropped their opiate use to like zero. And it's really been amazing. And a brand new study just came out, or it's coming out, being published, that's done at a workers' comp place where the typical average person treatment was 9 years, really people addicted to hardcore opiates. And they're getting 4 out of 10 people were actually able to get off opiates when we gave them a different solution. So when this technology, so whether it's enhancing sort of the speed of recovery, and this will jive with it if you're a physio listening. Look, we all know it's all about movement in the long run, so creating a window of opportunity for people to move however you want to do that, up to you. Managing congestion so that we can move, super cool. Can't move enough, how can we get more fake movement in there? And really, I suspect some of the magic of these devices is that we're just getting non-threatening input into the brain. If your back contracts 2 times a minute for 3 hours, your brain is like, well, how many contractions is that of isometrics, or, without actually having to move the joint, but it doesn't matter. We know that isometrics are tonic. So if you're getting that kind of movement into the system without seeing an actual joint movement, I suspect that alone is magical in terms of de-escalating threat for people. And really the question is, what are we giving people? We're like, oh, it doesn't work. And then, use this ice, and then here's an opiate. And I think even shifting loci of control back to people is as powerful as any other intervention. Here's something you can do to make yourself feel better so that you can move. I'm all in.
I like that. And you said something at the end there talking about oh, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. There's another PT who I really like and respect, Mike Reinhold. And I think he has he's really in touch with, okay, the research says this is what works in practice. And there's just a lot of gray area. It's not so black and white. So kind of a transitional question. A lot of what we see as PTs online right now, like on Instagram, on social media, is a lot of people that coming out almost like very polarizing with what they believe. Like, oh, if on one camp, maybe it's like, oh, if it's not directly said in the literature, X plus Y equals Z, then we can't do it. It's not we shouldn't be doing any of this, like maybe even manual therapy at all. But I think what I've seen is it's starting to come around. Almost maybe the pendulum is starting to shift back a little bit. But I don't know if you've kind of seen the same thing, or you have any thoughts on
Well,
that.
let's think about. Let's kind of snap out. Take a few versions back, or a little distance. Let's look at how most physical therapy is delivered. For starters, I go see my doctor. Doctor prescribes physical therapy. It takes me 2 to 6 weeks to get a visit. Maybe I get a 45-minute evaluation, or maybe I get a 30-minute eval, and then it maybe takes me another 2 weeks to get back in. Like, that's just speaking from experience here in San Francisco with how impacted physio is. In that session, what should be prioritized? What is the intervention? Is it a conversation? Is it tracking some kind of behavior? What thing am I going to hand this person as an ally so we can see intercession change, so that we can ultimately get them back into their community, occupying their role in their family, society, whatever? Is a PAVM, a passive joint mobilization, is that the best use of my time in that moment? And maybe I suspect that the people who kind of had a reaction to that were seeing that there was a lot of not active care given, where we're talking about pain science. We were giving people loaded movement prescriptions, discussions about sleep, all these other things. Instead, someone was trying to do a passive therapy to a person. And again, you can take manual therapy and define that however you will, right? I'm not in the room, which is something we should talk about, which is the fact that if we really want to get to the bottom of what is best practice, and you are the secret squirrel ninja practitioner, you're going to have to show me what your practice looks like. Because there's a lot of people who arguing about Kung Fu styles, and you never see anyone's Kung Fu. I challenge anyone to go ahead and get permission, and then go ahead and film your conversation, your elite conversation as a physio, soup to nuts, start to finish. Let me see your eval, and put that up for the rest of us. Put it up for the students so we can actually see how you're treating, what your interventions are, what your clinical reasoning is. Because you can talk about, to talk of bulls is not the same thing as to be in the bull ring. And we're seeing a lot of people talk about bulls. So I think the reaction from that crowd a little bit, who's not very transparent sometimes, was saying, is a manual therapy intervention, is that the right intervention for that moment? Like, I do a manual therapy on your knee, and then you don't load, we don't talk, we don't change, maybe it's less effective. And so I think some of us who came from a little bit different treatment model, i.e. we had more freedom to spend time with patients, maybe we're like, bro, what's wrong with you? Why don't you like manual therapy? Because we found it as just another tool to help that person meet their movement goals, et cetera, et cetera. And it turned out it was very effective. The way I treated for a long time, as an example, I'm not saying that's the paragon, but the first thing I would do is say, here's what I think your problem is. Do you understand what I think the problem is? Here's what you're going to do when you leave here. Then we're going to work on it together. And then the last thing I'm going to do is actually do some kind of hands-on thing to you, because it turns out that, maybe it's really useful for me to do a mobilization on you, but I need you to be able to get 80% of that effect by yourself somewhere else on your own. And I get my own personal bias, but the first thing we did was say, let's look at your movement. Let's look at what you're going to do in terms of movement and loading and isometrics, et cetera. Here's your mobilizations to restore your range of motion so you can do this movement. And the third was, is there a manual technique here that gets us to the end faster? And there are people who are not appropriate for that. I had people come in on, morphine and in chronic pain, and man, I don't touch them. Like, what you don't need is a manual therapy. So when you cast aspersions like that and say that it's not doing what we're really talking about there, bottom line, and I think the real missed opportunity to get to the heart of it was that we were always talking and only talking about pain. was a manual intervention the right way to address pain? And if you go back and look at any of those conversations, it's always about pain. It's never about, well, I improved your leg function or your flexion of your knee or your terminal knee extension, and restored it, and then you had no knee pain. It wasn't about function. It was about using some kind of manual technique to manage pain. And I'm not sure that that is the best use. So keep in mind, again, two things. One, was that conversation about pain? I think everyone agrees sometimes a manual technique and a passive technique is not the best way to help someone manage that. And two, what kind of situation was that clinician working in? Was that the best, most effective treatment solution tool to reach for? Probably not, if I don't get to see you very often.
I like that. So like, and maybe in a scenario, let's say someone comes in, and obviously it's hard to say it. There's many different ways to approach every patient client situation, but let's say someone comes in and they desperately need some squats or they need to strengthen their quads, and all you're doing is rubbing on their quad and, doing mass, maybe you're missing the boat there. But yeah, to your point, like, I think that, like, I use manual therapy. I use dry needling. I think those are great tools, to get someone to that end goal. But yeah, I see what you're saying. If applied appropriately at the right time, right context.
Like any other thing, though, it
Right.
it ends up being, I think, some of us have these really fancy manual therapy skills. They're super fun, but it turns out, it just ends up being another tool, just as much as the psychology of interacting with someone, or just as powerful as touching someone. And I think one of the things that ended up happening was that people stopped appreciating how powerful touch was. How many patients have you seen where someone's like, well, no one's actually touched my knee, or no one's touched my ankle, and I got a lecture. Recently I inherited a patient who was in a car accident, became a below knee amputee, and the physio he was getting was once a week for 30 minutes. He was getting a lecture, or like talking to and handouts, and no one had touched his stump or his residual limb, or no one had looked at all the other things, or the scar tissue in his abs or his other ankle. And so again, let's look at the resources available, and then all of the choices that you're making as a clinician, and then let's choose the thing that we think is going to get the person the furthest in the number of visits I get to see them. And if you're a cash-based PT, you may have more time and space to be able to explore a whole bunch of different things. And you might be able to see someone as many times as they need to see, and they're also highly invested. So you can imagine that if I just have a patient who comes to the table, expects me to mobilize their shoulder and then go, and we haven't changed anything, I'm just going to use up my 12 visits and call it good. And then, that's very different than you getting paid when people are getting success and putting your reputation on the line, your livelihood on the line every single day by the referrals that you're getting. So you're highly motivated to use all the tools to help this person achieve. Otherwise, you're going to get fired and go broke. If you have an infinite number of patients coming through a pipe, once again, you're looking at this problem very differently.
True. I like that. I think we could go on talking about that for a long time, but I'm going to switch topics slightly, because I really want to get into the new book you got coming out.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So Juliet and I have a new book coming out April 4th called Built to Move. And this is actually based on what we're talking about. We wrote Built to Move as sort of a blueprint for behaviors that we consider to be base camp behaviors. What is essential, not diet and exercise, not which diet to lose mass and which exercises, but what are all the behaviors a human being should engage in to become a durable person? This idea of longevity sometimes gets washed into like biohacking. I take this resveratrol, I do these things, I'm in a hyperbaric chamber, versus I got sunlight, I slept, I ate micronutrients, I moved my body. And one of the things we're trying to do is that Juliet and I, after owning a gym for 16 years and working in performance, is that we've left a whole generation of people behind. There's people who are very sophisticated with the nutrition science, and they're tracking things and they're eating and they're lifting. It's not our problem. This is not a diet and exercise book. We need to invite everyone else, because the amount of bullshit on the internet, and this is a great example of how Liver King and his deceit really has now done everyone a disservice because he's lied to everyone, made millions of dollars. Now you're like, well, everyone's a liar. What can we tell? So it's really gnarly what we're seeing. And meanwhile, people are like, wait, I had to eat all these, I have to be fearful of food. I have to, do this special. It's left people behind. And what I'll say is, again, if we take that framework back, we are more overweight. We are more diabetic. We are more depressed. We're taking more drugs. Like, we have more ACL injuries. There's more low back pain. There's more surgeries. I mean, like, what do you give a shit about? Tell me one of those metrics has improved. And what's happened is that we're really starting to become hyper. I mean, our neighbors come to Juliet and I are like, so which keto diet is right for me? And Juliet and I are like, holy shit, like, you don't eat enough protein or eat any fruits and vegetables. Like, what are you talking about? And so what we feel like with this book is it gives us the book that you could give every person of your family who's interested in improving their health. Every doctor could say, start here. We want to get you off blood pressure meds. Here's all the behavior, environmental component, lifestyle choices you can make that'll get you there, including walking or thinking about your set, So what we've done is choosing kind of 10 habits that we're trying to create as vital signs for people. If what we learned in the pandemic is that everyone understands what SaO2 is and what their temperature is and tracking all that. And I'm like, well, great. You can look at how many hours you slept and how many grams of carbohydrate, how many grams of fruits and vegetables you're eating. We just are expanding the idea of the vital sign to include these things, which we know end up being pillars of health. So that's what we're going to try to do. We've made the book so that you can give it to your aunts, you can give it to your uncle, you can give it to, or a patient and say, start here. And if you're an elite athlete, because we have a bunch of athletes who've read it, it also makes it's all of these things have served the foundation off of which we've built and work on elite performance.
Built like a foundation for everyone. That's cool.
Basically, like, let's stop arguing about like which color rope you're going to take up Everest. Like, we're like, dude, let's get to base camp first. You're not even out of the car yet,
There's something you said there too that I think was really cool. Well, two things. One, the whole Liver King, it kind of sparked something in my mind. How full to see, he's on Instagram, millions of followers. I hope people kind of realize that's kind of the tip of the iceberg when it comes to social media, like influencers, especially in the health and fitness space. That there's a lot of people on there that looked really jacked that are probably lying to you. There's a lot of people out there, so make sure you're following and getting advice from the right people.
It's tricky, really. And how would you know? How would I know? How would I know who's good at anything? I think that's really it's tricky there, right? And it's really done everyone a disservice because it's so easy to commoditize health and wellness, and I think he's done everyone a disservice. I think it's really, really gnarly.
The other thing you said there was all about the behavior and habits that are in this book. And I'm actually reading a book right now. I'm like almost done. I'm on Audible. Metabolical. Have you heard that one?
No.
It's we're part of our CrossFit gym started a book club, which is awesome. So we're all reading the same book as Metabolical. It's very much aligned with the typical CrossFit diet. Very little processed foods, little sugar. But one of the pieces of the book, I just read this today or listened to it today, was they're trying to help these obese kids, and one of the best ways they found to help them was actually bring the kids in, their parents in, and a group of them made the food for them, showed them that it was healthy, showed them how much it cost, and showed them how to make it. And that was one of the biggest pieces of success, basically building them the habits and showing them that, okay, this is what you actually have to do to get results. So the fact that it's like all behaviors and habits, and I'm a huge fan of the book Atomic Habits too. So I think that's where the game changer is. Yeah.
And it really, I think when you start to look at any of these behaviors as, you can apply any filter you like. This is a self-soothing technique. Like if you're super stressed out, you're going to reach for whatever mechanism you have. Is that bourbon? Is that THC? Is that TV? Is that food? People are self-soothing. And once you understand that view on it around sort of these behaviors and how these behaviors get reinforced, it really gives you a lot more empathy and gives you a different perspective on how you're going to change and sort of sneak people into other behaviors. It's, you've heard the John Berardi where, Precision Nutrition, he had a new client, and the guy's like, John was like, why don't you get a dog? Your first order of business is to get a dog. And the guy's like, well, I got a dog and I have to walk it all the time. And I lost 10 pounds. And John's like, yep. And then he's like, okay, now I need you to drink a glass of water every day. And the guy's like, well, I can do that. And he's like, cool, we'll talk to you in 2 weeks, and, and lo and behold, so I think, one of the things that Juliet and I feel like is we have given people the biohacking elite performance group. There's this laundry list of stuff you're going to get to do every day, and you did it or didn't. What we try to do is ask, where are people going to have some agency in their day? So, and this works if you're working with patients or clients. Where do they have control? And if you're talking to a busy person, they're not going to get on the ground and roll out during the day. Whatever. Like, I'm in my dress. Like, what? That's not going to happen. But what we see is that people had some agency in the morning to maybe do 5 or 10 minutes of breath work or go for a walk. Maybe they could sneak in a walk after every meal. And then maybe in the evening, if they were able to exercise, cool, but in the evening, they might have some agency. And so what we really try to do is say, hey, where are all these behaviors which we agree and are universal in their application around creating really healthy people? Where are those things fit into a modern life? And I think exactly as you're saying, when you start to make things sticky and convenient, then they're more likely to do it.
I like that a lot. As far as your book, do you say there was 10 habits in there?
10 habits.
10 habits. Is the book released yet?
No, it'll be out April 4th.
April 4th.
And you'll see, if you speak strength and conditioning, you're going to be like, that sneaky mofo. He's got people shoulder extension. That's all hip extension. This chapter is about hip flexion. This chapter is about being arms overhead. Really, I've snuck in lots and lots of isometrics, some really simple mobilizations, but really isometrics in a lot of key end range positions for people just to begin to restore their positions. You're going to be like, holy moly, how did he do that? And really, it's all based in the other ideas, right?
I feel like that's one of the toughest exercises to prescribe to people is the isometrics because they're so boring. I feel like
so we just do everything is measured in here on breaths. So take 5 breaths. Can you hold this position for 5 breaths? Right. Hold this position for 10 breaths. And I think by sidestepping the time, we're able to get out of I'm like, I don't want to have that fight. So let's talk about breathing instead. Also you need to be able to breathe in a position. What did Greg Cook say? If you can't breathe in a position, you don't owe that position. So, some of what we're trying to do is add in some movement control tactics into some of these end ranges in a sneaky, easy to use. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be the most important work that Juliet and I ever do. And I hope it helps some people begin to make sense of their lives. We're getting the feedback from the people who read it. Like, one of our habits is to sit on the ground while you're watching TV. That's hip range of motion. You're going to fidget, you're going to 90-90. And so, I think a lot of people have found that they can incorporate these things, which actually do end up making them feel better.
That's cool. I'm excited for it. And I think it's going to help my practice too, as far as just giving me real tactical information to give to people.
You're going to be able to be like, read this book. And then we can, because it really, we always, I think, if my critique of Supple Leopard, is one of the critiques is that it doesn't tell you what to do day to day. I'm like, well, how many grams of protein should I eat? And, how do I think about sleeping there? And which behaviors help me to go to sleep? And I can't put that in there. So for me, it's this user manual of what you could do every day. And we talk about caffeine and alcohol and moving and, and self-soothing. I think it's going to be great.
That's cool. Speaking of alcohol, is the Supple Leopard tequila ever going to come out?
Oh man, Leopard's Tears.
Is that what it was? Yeah.
Yeah. I actually had to take April Fool's off last year because the year before people were so pissed that everyone listening, we made a fake ad for a fake tequila. It was a functional tequila that had like aminos and vitamins and collagen, and people reached out and really were bummed because we put it on our Shopify. Like you couldn't, we went down the road and we had distributors reaching out saying, hey, we'd like to be the exclusive distributors of your Leopard's Tears tequilas. So we couldn't do it. Hey, I had to take a year off.
You always know if you have a backup plan, you could just make tequila.
Oh man, seriously. What I wanted to do last year was I went to Africa to go paddling, and I wanted hoping we were running into a bunch of hyenas because I wanted to make hyenas milk like protein from hyenas milk as an April Fool's joke, and we were going to set it up, but we didn't actually run into enough hyenas to actually make it work because I was like, hyena milk, like it's just weird enough that people are like, is this real?
Right.
We're in Africa and we've actually got hyenas, and anyway, couldn't quite pull it off. So we'll see what happens this year.
Hey, I'll be looking forward to it. April 1st. Well, all right. So we'll switch gears slightly here. So, one thing I'm super passionate about is CrossFit. No, by no means a great athlete, but definitely an admirer of the sport. And I know you've been very intertwined with it pretty much since you started. And you're also involved with the CrossFit Health organization currently. And I saw you, I think it was during the pandemic, during the when they did I think it was like a day-long seminar where they had each of the different presenters. They had you, Amy West, Sean Rocket. And I just had the pleasure of speaking with Amy West on the podcast recently. But just want to get your thoughts on that.
I call her Big Brains. She's Big Brains.
Oh, she is. She is. I felt bad because I was just hammering away just from my own personal I wanted to know about like stem cells and PRP and all that stuff, but
that's so great.
Yeah, she answered the questions really well. But yeah, anything coming up with that? Anything kind of on the horizon for CrossFit Health?
To my understanding, I think they're just a little bit in a holding pattern. I think they're still trying to develop, but what's happening is, CrossFit, as you know, is in a moment of equilibrium, trying to find its feet, figure out what it wants to do. So, there's always some movement. I've been seeing some courses, but we're trying to get another course set up through as an SME. We've had to put a pause on. I'm actually teaching it this weekend. Will be the first course I've gone back into CrossFit with a CrossFit specific course. It's called P3, Pain, Position, and Power. And we're basically skimmed all the cream off all our courses over the years. And we're just doing a 1 day. If you're in pain, what should you do as an athlete? What are the tools available to? And then have an assessment with some really simple pieces. So we wanted to create a pain and an assessment course for CrossFit. And so we're launching that back out. And that was, part of that was trying to be part of CrossFit Health so that we could turn CrossFit also into a better real-time diagnostic assessment.
That's cool. Yeah. I saw something recently they posted about they're doing like a level 1 course for healthcare providers. Something like that. I'm not sure. I just scrolling across my Instagram feed. I'm like, oh, that looks cool. But
yes. What's interesting, of course, is that there are tons of physicians and physios who are already doing that, right?
Yeah.
So good. Look, I think they've got a lot of dogs they're trying to fight right now, and a lot of balls in the air. And we know that creating community and regular movement, high quality movement that's teaching towards the highest expression of movement, which has always been a tenet of CrossFit, even if it always hasn't been expressed in that way in CrossFit. But I think we're seeing that. I believe that some of the best coaches on the planet that I know are CrossFit coaches in any sport, at any domain. They're the most sophisticated, best coaches on the planet.
I agree with that. And they're extremely passionate about movement and, skill, progression,
and programming. It's
man.
Bananas. Take someone like Yami Tikkanen, look at Rich Froning. I mean, you just understand how sophisticated some of these people are. It's really, really, they are remarkable thinkers about training people. And what's fun to see is continuing to see that as the base for what I'm going to call sports preparation training. I think CrossFit in its original iteration was good GPP, as self-described. But then I think a bunch of people realized that we could tweak it up a little bit and make it more about sports performance and sports preparation by looking at foot pressure or looking at what's happening with transfers. I think when CrossFit started, it was like, well, as long as you're fitter and do more work, you'll be better. And that was a fine argument when no one was fit, no one was skilled, no one was strong. But suddenly we're seeing that people are coming in. No one pukes anymore anywhere in the world because we have Peloton and various boot camp and, Orange Theory, and people are working really hard. And CrossFit's been around for, 20 years. So one of the things we're starting to see is those coaches figuring out how to take CrossFit style, CrossFit based programming and actually work with athletes doing sports. The problem I feel with CrossFit as a sport by itself is that you can't actually do CrossFit as a sport and actually do another sport. The metabolic demands, the challenges of that are insane. But if you suddenly start to tweak, you realize we have a great template to make athletes in other sports besides Olympic lifting, right, better. It's super cool.
Yeah, I'm going through my undergrad. I was in exercise science, and I went through and got the CSCS like through the NSCA, and was like infatuated with all how they show all these studies and all that. And then once I got out of college and in PT school, I started doing CrossFit and didn't really realize there was any beef behind the scenes between the two. And went to the level 1 course and
bro, we all deadlift. It's all good.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And the stuff they taught, I mean, it was all legit, like by the book. Really, one of the best. One thing I will say that I didn't love about the NSCA CSCS testing protocol was it was in a computer lab. So, and the CrossFit level 1 course was all basically hands-on, like movement, like watching people move. So it was a fantastic. It was at the Reebok World Headquarters with Austin Malleolo, Connor Murphy, those guys up there who are awesome. My point of that was I had this conversation with my friend a lot, how a lot of the CrossFit based stuff seemed like kind of just like lab experiment, like groundwork type, like, oh, if we throw this into a workout, how do we respond to that? And it's almost like they've been performing their own experiments since the creation of CrossFit to kind of figure out how these workouts affect people and move. And I don't think the NSCA side of things where they're actually like going into the lab and doing research and doing studies. I think there was definitely some people who clash with those two polar opposites of like, okay, we know this works. We don't actually have a lot of the studies to back it up that way, but at the end of the day, it's effective and it's working. And it's making people fitter. And even to bring up Liver King one more time, I don't know if you watched the YouTube video of Derek, More Plates, More Dates. He did an hour-long he was doing CrossFit twice a day. He wasn't doing a lot of the barbarian stuff. He was actually doing CrossFit. So just kind of another way to say, okay.
Well, you believe it or not, effective. A long time ago, Greg Glassman said the best way to put on mass is to do CrossFit and steroids together. Like he said that outright. Then he said CrossFit, and then he said bodybuilding with steroids, or maybe it was like, CrossFit with steroids, bodybuilding with steroids, CrossFit, then bodybuilding. And, what we know is how are you defining fitness? And I don't mean like in 100 words or less or increased work. I mean, I think one of the reasons we got early gains in CrossFit is because we asked people to be competent in dumbbells and barbells and kettlebells, and to learn the tenets of basic weightlifting and learn how to run and program some monostructural stuff. And what ended up happening is we had people who became a lot more competent at transferring skills more effectively. And that constantly varied, ended up meaning, can you show competence with a dumbbell, with a kettlebell, with a barbell, all going overhead, even those are slightly different. And then I flip the athlete upside down. I'm like, show me you can do a handstand. Show me you can, right? So it's still overhead positioning, but under so many different other iterations and considerations. And then you started to see people bring in periodization and more intelligent programming, because when you're a beginner, it doesn't matter. I mean, like my 14-year-old daughter, I can throw anything at her, and she gets stronger and better. And I think that's where we used to be in the beginning. How many people were overhead squatting? No one was overhead squatting. So it didn't matter. What mattered was the overhead squatting. And then I came to really understand that I think one of the things that made CrossFit so interesting and became a tenet in my own thinking was that we traditionally weren't using exercise complexity as a programming tool, CSCS, and we sure as hell weren't using speed as a programming tool, and we absolutely weren't using cardiorespiratory demand as a conditioning tool or as a training tool. So great, you can press this empty barbell over your head 10 times. Now do it with your heart rate at 190. And what we were saying is, oh, no, you'll blunt the adaptation of the strength overhead. But meanwhile, we were starting to see that as more about coordination and efficiency and maintaining the skill, even at unloads. And if you look at the original CrossFit loading, it's super moderate. 100 kilos for 45 reps. Are you serious? 45 pull-ups over the course of a workout, like that's high volume. It's super low volume, right? Even 10 to 1 is only 55 reps. So I think what you end up seeing is that we had real moderate volume at low loads, but done with the heart rate really high, and it exposed everyone to the fact that they weren't very good at managing these positions. And so for us, suddenly we realized as physios, I was like, oh, I don't just have to make it heavier. I just need to put this person on an exercise bike and then come over here and have them practice their goblet squat again, right? 3-limb exercise biking and then slow tempo landmine press will kill someone. And what that did as a physio is it gave me a whole nother way of challenging someone's movement and tissues without having to just make it heavier and add more volume.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think, to your point, the programming aspect has really come a long way. Quick example, I have I have a client who I'm working with, who I'm collaborating with. They have a virtual coach. This guy Rene over at Training Think Tank, who's a great coach. And he was showing me some of the program. He's a low back injury. He's showing me some of the program he's doing. And this guy, his virtual coach, programmed in Stuart McGill's Big Three. I'm like, really? Didn't know you knew about those. I thought that was just a PT thing. I'm like, wow, the worlds are really like blending together. Everybody's learning from stuff from each other. So I thought that was pretty cool and a great testament to like, wow, like these guys are smart.
Yeah, and McGill is not a physical therapist, is he? So I think, I think what we always should be doing is, anytime we're working with a person, we're making a hypothesis. And my hypothesis is that you sleep more, you'll feel better, right? My hypothesis is that if you walk more, you'll be tired enough to go to bed. So all our health behaviors are ultimately on inputs and outputs, right? What gets measured, what gets managed. We've all been based on test, retest here at the Race It Forever. Test, retest. I don't believe you. You have to show me that you made change. You have to show me that you're, so always our objective measures have been range of motion, which is sort of unequivocal. Everyone agrees, and biomotor output. So the thing is that I'm saying is that if you have full range of motion and we do this, you're going to run faster. You're going to lift more weights. You're going to do those things. And I think that's where one of the places it's a snag for a lot of physios, because you can do a lot of low level, low skill, low speed, low intensity movements in shit positions, and you can have some stimulus, but that stimulus was about tendon loading. The stimulus wasn't about expression or coordination or efficiency. And so suddenly when we started putting that a little bit more nuance into, it didn't matter, if you watch Greg, who was it'll come to me. He is doing Fran in front of like Jim Wendler or something like that at Westside. And he is going up and down super fast and his feet are all over the place. Like every foot position is crap and his knees are making circles and his shoulders are in a different position every single time. What you see is, wow, there's a lot of making mistakes and poor movement coordination there at the expense of a lot of work. And that's the statement that the Westside coach makes is, well, I see a lot of movement variability. So if I was trying to teach this as a high skill movement, that's less effective. But what we've seen now is that these athletes have become robots, not in a negative sense. They've become so skilled because the efficiency matters so much. Justin Medeiros' efficiency is getting bananas. Rich's efficiency, Matt Frazier's efficiency, all of those people, I don't mean to only choose men, but, just as a role. But what we're starting to see is that we can transfer that back into biomotor expression. And we just grabbed that early on in our positioning. So we started to care more about how a movement transfer than can you just do more reps? Because that doing just more reps in something doesn't make you a better athlete and a more coordinated athlete.
Totally. Yeah. And people at that level, you're looking at them like, okay, where's the holes in their game? I don't see any. Like, how can they possibly get any better?
It's your parents' genetics. That's the problem.
Right.
You chose the wrong parents.
And I had
the work volumes that people are undergoing for CrossFit right now are insane. Mal is a really extraordinary young person.
Yeah.
Haley is a mutant. I mean, I've spent some time with Haley. I call her a friend, and she's one of the most exceptional athletes I've met.
That's super cool. Yeah, I was talking with someone the other day. I'm like, I think we probably already are seeing. I'm just not paying attention, but I think we're gonna be able to predict like who's gonna be winning the CrossFit Games like as they're coming through the teen ranks. Like these people that are just winning like at like 16, 17, 18, we're gonna see like, okay, this person is gifted, bearing any injury.
We'll start to have the metrics for them to be able to handle the volumes to work that hard. There's actually, I think I saw a piece. Alan Cousins put it up on Twitter, and I think he was saying that you can predict, or someone was able to predict, whether you were just going to be a national team or an international soccer player based on your HRV alone. And that HRV was such a discriminator between national level player, international level player. I played Premier Soccer. I'm a good player, right? I'm a
Mhm.
college athlete, professional athlete. And HRV was a significant determinant about whether you could handle the volumes and to be able to work up. And I think we'll start to have those same metrics given enough time, that if you can do this, you have the potential to have the genes to be able to handle this kind of volume to be able to go to the games.
And that's something, as far as I know, that wasn't even on my radar until like a few years ago, the HRV data at all, until I got a
Well,
Whoop.
right. And then thinking about it as, as a metric of not necessarily, day to day, but what is my HRV? What does that mean? And is it related to a whole? How's that relate to performance? I think we haven't seen lots of people get comfortable with saying we expect this kind of HRV data in our elite athletes. What we've seen is, your HRV is good, your HRV is bad. You know what I mean? I think, and maybe that's a less effective way of thinking about it in terms of your recovery. It's another data point, but taken as a whole, we can see trends that, man, if you aren't able to express huge amounts of variability, you probably are going to be a good CrossFit gym box athlete and not even a regional competitor.
That's crazy. Yeah. Excited to see the future of that.
Well, what's fun is how skillful and intentional these athletes are. And let me say shout out to so many great CrossFit coaches that I know, and that how sophisticated and dedicated the athletes are. What's happening in CrossFit right now is as significant and legit as any other professional sport. And right now, I'm working with Team England. Let me just tell you, come on, England. That's we're in the World Cup right now. I've been working with this team for 2 years, and my CrossFit athletes are working as hard and are as sophisticated as the national English soccer team.
Wow, that's cool.
Shout out.
We're getting towards the end, and I do have another question on that, but I have two other topics I want to ask you. But we'll see where we go.
All right.
One of them. So I know you had a knee replacement a while ago, right? Was it a couple years ago now?
2 years ago.
Kind of wanted to see how that whole experience was for you. Just as a PT, I tell people, and this could be wrong, I hope it's not, but hip replacements, those are pretty easy to recover from. Knee replacements, it's gonna be a little harder, a little more painful. But I don't know if you've had the same experience or kind of how that was for you, and what brought you to the point where you're like, okay, I need to get this done.
Yeah. Well, according to functional patterns, it's because I have squatted all the way down that I've injured my knees. And you should never squat below 90, because I've created, what was the word? Flaccid ligaments was the term he put. So it's weird, but only happened to my right knee, not my left knee.
Did he actually say that?
Yeah. He said it.
No way. Okay.
And I just want to set the record straight on the internet here that 9 years ago, I was skiing very fast, and I booted out going about 40 or 50 miles an hour on my skis. And I slipped, and then the ski caught as I was sliding on my right side, and I just put a little bit of energy into my knee, and I crashed and stood up. It was just a slide out, like it happens 1,000 times. I slid out 1,000 times, and I stood up, and my wife skied down, and she was like, "What happened?" She's like, "You're covered in snow." I was like, "Oh, I sprained my knee," and I skied down. But what had happened was I put my femur into my tibia and created 2 kissing bone lesions. So I crushed both surfaces of the joints and had a lot of swelling because there was, a lot of edema in there, and got an MRI a couple months later because I couldn't work out while I was continuing to swell, et cetera, et cetera. And I skied and continued to train, do everything. But turned out they just told me you should replace your knee as soon as you're possible. And I was like, I think I got a few more miles in here. So I managed the swelling and managed it. And then after 7 years of dealing with the compensation, of limiting certain movements, of exaggerating other things, it was starting to bug me and interfere with my ability to hike with my family or ski all day, things like that. And when I went in there and talked to the doctor for the San Jose Sharks, I talked to the head of orthopedics at CSF, I talked to a bunch of experts on this. Everyone's consensus was that the only good option was a knee replacement. And I couldn't do a chondroplasty, I couldn't do a partial. And when they got in there, it turns out, again, I didn't go in for knee pain. I had positions that didn't feel good and positions that felt like electricity, but not day to day, no knee pain, no ache, nothing. It would swell, and that was my big concern. I had full range of motion, terminal knee extension. But when they got in there, I had a huge damage in my trochlea from my kneecap grinding in. And it was because the knee had been so chronically swollen for so many years that we know that that is a really like an accelerator of degradation on the joint surfaces. And what's interesting is that we have always said in our clinic, hey, we take swelling seriously because it's gonna limit your range of motion, because it's gonna shut down your force production. And over time, it's hard on the surfaces of the joint. And I got taken apart by the PT community once again, who was like, swelling's not a big deal. And I think what they heard was I was making an emergency, but really in our athletic populations, we were saying, hey, we need to take care of this because you're not going to be able to handle the kinds of forces, joints, et cetera. So they got in there and they were like, holy moly, this is real. And I'm happy to share any of the pictures of the inside of my knee, and you'll be shocked at how gross it looks in there. And yet no knee pain. The problem was I had grindy feelings when I would lunge, or I had positions like I ran a Spartan in half, like a beast, in September, and then had my knee replaced end of October. So just so we're clear, I was still working on it, but I couldn't work it out. Like I was like, I can't find a way to run that feels good, you know? And it turns out the inside surfaces look like a shit show. So I end up having a total knee replacement, and I end up having the most conservative knee you could. It's cemented. It's been around for over 10 years, and I couldn't be happier with it. I can do whatever. Let me just repeat. I'm going to swear here. Swear warning. Cover your ears. I can do whatever the fuck I want. Ski hard, jump off things, backflip, deadlift. I do limit my power cleans to 100 kilos because I just don't know what that sheer force looks like.
It's a good amount.
So I just do 225 power cleans all day.
Nice. How was the rehab painful for you, or how'd it go?
What I learned early on was that I had a couple problems with the surgery, and pardon me, everyone's heard this, but one is they actually had a hard time cutting my femur because I had good bone density. And it just goes to show you, as an anecdote, they went through, they were on the third saw when they finally were able to make the cuts. And the reason I mention that is I'm not a mutant. I was like, you should see my mutant friends. But it speaks to the fact that how poorly they do this surgery on people who are healthy, are strong, are right. And what they're typically doing it is on people who are very, very low bone density. So they were really shocked. The second thing I think is interesting is when they cut the capsule, I bled and bled and bled and bled. And that really shocked them because most people's capsule isn't very vascularized. And my friend, my best friend, who is the joint rep for the area, was in there, and the resident was like, whoa, what's going on? You know, he's bleeding a ton. Everyone's kind of freaking out. And he was like, hey, he is an aerobic athlete. He's been training aerobically forever. And what you're seeing is capillarization. So I had really good capillarization in those tissues and bled. Those were the two, I think, indicators that people weren't really prepared to handle young people who have real high expectations. So my expectation was 100% return to play, do everything that I want to do. That was my expectation. And I can kneel and jump from a kneeling position. If you go to the Ready State Instagram, you can see me jumping off my knees and landing in a squat. That's after my knee replacement. And what I'll show you is, you know, I can kneel, I have good flexion. I can do that knees behind toes guy, knees over toes guy, you know, bends, lean back where you're in a squat, lean back. I can do all of that. I have insane range, but I worked on it obsessively, and I did not assume that their typical guidelines were enough. And I want people to understand that those typical guidelines, I think, are reasonable, but they're not where the limits are at all. Cool. So I was very conservative. I didn't push things. I didn't, you know, but at 14 weeks, I deadlifted 575 because I was like, there's no reason why I can't.
I saw that video.
And that was a misload. And, but the idea is, I think the bottom line is that I just took the same ideas that we use in CrossFit or CrossFit programming or in working with athletes, and I scaled them backwards for my own self. How do I progress this? I set my goals and then work backwards. My goal was to be on my bike at 12 weeks, riding my bike. I was on my bike without, you know, clipless shoes at 10 weeks, but really riding at 12 weeks. But I worked backwards to make sure do I have enough range of motion for this? Do I have the control for this? You know what I mean? Et cetera, et cetera. So I think what I realized is that we've set the bar very low for most orthopedic outcomes. And all I really did was manage my swelling and use things like BFR and H-wave, and I was able to maintain my muscle mass. And yesterday we were shooting in the studio, and the head of our production couldn't tell which knee I'd had operated on when I was standing there.
Wow.
And she was like, "Which knee is it? I can't even see your scar." And I was like, "Perfect. That's the goal, right?"
That's incredible. That's very cool.
Very lucky.
Well, hey, we're at the top of the hour here. I really appreciate your time. I don't want to keep you any longer. I do have one last thing I usually leave people off with. So the way I describe it is the main highway here on the East Coast, we have Highway 95. So I usually say, hey, this is a Tim Ferriss question, which actually, funny side story. I looked up some of your podcasts and I saw you're in episode number 3 with Tim.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I know. Tim has been he's an old friend of mine. He's been a friend for a long time.
So you've heard this question probably then. So you get a billboard on 95 that basically something to tell the people. It could be a quote, mantra or saying, basically something to just like tell the people of your community.
Be consistent before you're heroic.
Like that.
The next one is sleep. I get 2 billboards.
Nice.
Literally, like, you gotta sleep. People, you're sleep. You're sleeping like shit. You need to worship your sleep.
Love it. Well, Kelly, thank you so much. We'll end on that.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. All right, Roadie Strength, we are signing off.